start, just do a quick round of introductions. Is that kind of the first thing that was on the agenda? Yep.
It is.
Okay. So I'll start. I'm John Nowak. I'm co-executive director of CHIP. And I'll call names if that's okay. So Lori, you want to go next?
Hey, I'm Lori Fleming, also co-executive director of CHIP.
Cynthia? I think you're on mute.
Yep, just got that. Cynthia Osterman from the Benchy Project.
Susan?
I'm Susan O'Brien, nurse practitioner at the school-based clinics at Chimacum and Port Townsend, and also work at the health department.
Lexa?
Hi, I'm Lexa Murphy. I'm a child psychologist in independent practice. I also do diagnostic evals at Julie's practice, MCS, and I teach at Seattle U.
Finn?
I am Finn O'Donnell. I'm Port Townsend High School student body president.
And Tanya?
Hi, I'm Tanya Barnett. I'm the Family Resource Navigator with the YMCA.
Emma?
Hi, I'm Emma. I am a senior nursing student at Idaho State University.
Dr. Parker?
Hi, I'm Molly Parker. I work at Jefferson Healthcare.
Case?
I'm Case Koff, a retired pediatrician, and I'm on the board of the Public Hospital District.
Denise?
I'm Denise Banker, retired college professor, and I am a health educator at Jefferson County Public Health.
Trish, I see you're out for a walk.
I am out for a walk on that walking path you and Lori helped us with. I'm Trish Bethard, superintendent of the Brennan School District.
Julie?
I don't know why my video is not working. I'll try coming back in after I introduce myself. My name is Julie Canterbury, and I'm the owner of MCS Counseling, and we have therapists embedded with the police department, Port Townsend Police Department, the Jefferson Sheriff's Department, and also in all the public schools in Jefferson County. And we also do private practice. Thank you.
And Jenny?
Jenny Vervink, behavior interventionist, Port Townsend Schools, and Kitsap Mental Health Services.
Great, thanks. Thanks everyone for joining. Laura, you want to pull up the slides?
Excuse me, did we miss Tanya?
Nope, I think she introduced herself.
Thanks, sorry about that.
No sweat. So kind of have done welcome and introductions. Finn is going to talk a little bit about one of the things we talked about at the last meeting is just involving someone from the youth segment in our group, which is supposedly about youth. So Finn's going to talk a little bit about that, and I think he has some recommendations about how we might be able to get more participation from young folks on our team, and then some updates from several members of this group. Emma, as she introduced herself, is a student at Idaho or Idaho State, can't remember, but her project is to develop some type of a plan. So I think we'll get some clarity for her around that today. And then if we have time, we'll look at the framework. Lori and I did some updating to that since the last meeting, and then just reset at the end. So with that, I'm going to kind of quit talking. And Finn, if you're ready to go, I will turn it over to you.
Sure. Thank you, John. I'm glad to be here. Thank you all for having me. And thank you, Lori, for inviting me today. I just did full screen there when I didn't mean to. So I'm a student at Port Townsend High School. I'm the student body president there, as I introduced myself. I'm pretty involved politically at the state level. I spend a lot of time during legislative session lobbying on bills and meeting with legislators to advocate for student mental health and school funding. Now, so I've only got one real recommendation and then maybe some just advice to go about fulfilling that recommendation, and that is to get students on the panel. Like John said, this is the youth age work group. Supposedly, you couldn't tell from looking at the work group meeting today. we live in a county with, I think it's nearly 2,700 students. Every school has a student body government, and there are a lot of great students, a lot of great talent to draw from to get representation on your school board. I know that Cynthia is doing work with the Benji Project, just did a survey, which I think we'll talk about later in the meeting. And as I understand it, has run into a couple issues with getting students to participate. And I think that's generally true of students, not just this year, but in all years. Finding willing participants can be difficult, even though there are a lot of great, talented students out there. So the easiest way, I think, to get a student to participate in something is to pay them. Amazon gift cards work pretty well. I know the Benji Project used an Amazon gift card raffle and found some pretty good success with that. We do live in a small community with small school districts, so it is difficult to gather data in large scale, but paying people usually works well. And then just reaching out, right? I mean, looking at our schools, we've got a lot of great resources, like I said. So making the call to, say, the Dean of Students at Port Townsend High School or Chimacum, or finding out who is on who the student representative to the school board is at any of our schools. There are a lot of great people, and as long as we put in the work and reach out, you'll generally be able to find somebody who is happy to work with you. So I do have a few questions for everyone here. I know it's still early in the CHIP planning stage, but I would like to hear, since we've got a little bit of time, some of your visions for what you'd envision this year's CHIP to look like. And I'd love to specifically hear about some of the programs and activities you're interested in carrying out. So if anybody would just like to step up and go first, that would be great.
I can dive in. This is Molly. So I think John and Lori have done a good job of putting together our goals and strategies, and we're still in that stage there. So I think you'll see, if you're able to stay on till the end, that starts to outline some of the things we're thinking about. And then the plan is, John and Lori, correct me if I'm wrong, but is to plug those activities in once we figure out the goals and strategies, so that it all fits to go a specific direction. But a lot of what we've been talking about thus far has really been decreasing the silos. There are services in our community, mental health services, but a lot of us don't know about what each other are doing. So that's been some of the work in the beginning.
That's great to hear. Anyone else? I think as Lori mentioned earlier, Emma is working on drafting a plan for something. I've heard talk of a focus group.
Yeah, so we haven't, so I have to create a proposal to improve the public health of the town I was born in, and I was born in Port Townsend. And so we thought that it'd be a good idea for me to come just to kind of get like an idea of what gap there is in, I guess, mental health specifically, that I could create a proposal for my project. And other than that, we were kind of gonna talk about something and maybe make something more concrete after the meeting today. Okay. But I'm super open to like anything. I mean, a focus group or like you said, involving the youth, because I think that that's really important where we are focusing on like that specific age group. So
yeah, I think focus groups are tough in our community. I mean, like I said, we're a small community. You run into problems of scale, right? When you're doing a focus group let's say you have, I don't know, a population of 500,000 people. You can do a focus group with 50 people and it'll be representative. But if you have a population of 50 people, you can't do a focus group with 0.5 people. Scaling this kind of thing in small communities is really difficult, and finding willing participants can be just as tricky. So I think I like the idea, but I do think we run into problems of scale. And I'm curious to see if there are ways to go about, I don't know, just polling.
So Finn,
Yeah.
This is Denise. And yesterday at our coalition meeting, the Empowered Teens Coalition in Chimacum, which all of my work with the Community Health Improvement Plan, CHIP, is tied into, we discussed focus groups, and we discussed specifically engaging the ASB in helping us to plan and implement focus groups. And this is around a communications development plan that we are in the midst of creating. And Mark Gudger, who is the Dean of Students at the Chimacum Junior Senior High School, and Stephanie Tell, who is also on an ASB representative at the Chimacum Junior Senior High School, suggested that there's a training that they could take that will help them to be more adept at implementing and engaging students in ASB. And so the coalition is actually looking into paying for them to have a training. And the more that we can talk and integrate ourselves into the ASB and the work the ASB does, and then help the ASB understand the work that we do, we think that we'll be able to make better inroads into improving mental health, and then by extension, substance abuse engagement among that age population. So that's kind of the strategy we hammered out yesterday at our meeting. And then we're going to have a couple of ad hoc meetings to address those two strategies. So that's out there.
Finn, I think you made a really good point about trying to get a focus group that represented the community when your community is small. It is kind of difficult. And I think one of the challenges for Jefferson County is, we have a large clump of the population in Port Townsend, but then you've got, us down here in Brennan with some same needs and some that are quite different, and our challenges are sometimes quite different. So to really address the entire county, we have to make sure we kind of keep an eye on Brennan and Quilcene.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think that Brennan and Quilcene, and then I think we have we have 2 other districts that draw from Jefferson County out in West County that often don't get enough attention when we're looking at these kinds of issues. So I think that whatever CHIP is doing should be, of course, looking at all of the school districts in our county, not just the 2 biggest ones.
Finn, one of the things that as behavior interventionist and working in middle school and elementary school, one of my concerns is that we often, when we're looking to hear the voice of youth, we do tend to think about, let's call the ASB or let's call the leaders, let's talk to students who have a particular level of acuity. And I'm very concerned that there's a voice that's not being spoken, a youth voice that's not being spoken, and that is the students that do not rise to that level. These are kids that are in very difficult situations. They're kids that have a voice that's not being heard, not being even invited into the conversation. And they have things to tell us about the ways youth could be better supported in the community that we don't go to. We go to the leadership, which are wonderful, wonderful students. There's no question. I taught high school. I know that those kiddos, but we're not asking the kiddos who really are in need of the kind of services I think we're trying to address.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I agree that we do run into those issues because ASBs are generally self-selecting. Leadership is self-selecting. And even though they're technically representative, I mean, I know that not everybody votes in our high school ASB elections. So yeah, I mean, I agree, and that I think that also gets to problems of scale and gets to problems of execution and engagement. Finding ways to engage disenfranchised students can be really difficult. When I look at something like what Denise is doing with the Empowered Teens Coalition, is that the right name for it? With something like the Empowered Teens Coalition, we've got great organizations and great opportunities to look at distressed students who maybe are suffering from substance abuse issues or struggling with mental health, and use the tools that we have in our schools to talk to them and to hear their voice on these issues. Because I think that, you know, even though they might not be as eloquent or professional as somebody in ASB might be, their input is going to be even more valuable.
Thank you.
And I wanted to give you a little bit of insight because I think actually it could be very helpful. I think the focus of this CHIP plan right now is really around adolescent behavioral health, both mental health and substance use disorder. And I think that's really the focus of a lot of what we're trying to do. And I know that that's a topic that's kind of near and dear to your heart as well. And I think I feel a little chagrined that we haven't talked to adolescents in our community to find out their point of view. And I'm very interested, as you're a bit of an expert about that, I think. And I'm wondering, I'd love to see your continued participation, but I'm wondering, in a quick 5 or 10 minutes, kind of what you see as effective strategies at helping kids in our community that have mental health and substance use disorder issues. And
yeah.
Wondering if you'd be willing to comment on that.
Yeah. Well, I think as all of the educators and public health professionals in here know, school is only so much of the equation, right? We run into issues dealing with people with substance abuse and mental health issues, of having traumatic home lives, of being very poor, of dealing with crime and substance abuse at home, where that is just their everyday life. So I think we can do something with school there, and that is to make schools an engaging and fun and healthy place that students actually want to go, and putting adults in schools that students want to reach out to and want to make connections with. I'm very grateful. I talk about this a lot when I'm meeting with legislators. We have therapists in our schools for free, who students can see during school hours. That's a great opportunity. And I think that's been really helpful. I got to interview our therapist, Megan Smith, for a Red Hawk Review student newspaper article, I think 2 years ago now. And I got some really good insight on what she offers at our schools. And having people that distressed students can talk to, can come to with their problems, and can seek help and advice from, I think can do a lot. Now, I mean, I also think that, when we look at improving public health in our community, we live in a very unaffordable community. We live in a community that has a lot of drug addiction and struggles with employment issues. I think that a lot of our public health problems are also very big economic issues that are going to take a lot of push from the county, from the state, and from our towns to meet.
I have a question. I did have a question. I'm forgetting it right now.
Hi, Mom.
Hello, Mr. O'Donnell. My name is Kate Dean. I'm County Commissioner. I'm curious if we can go back to that idea of reaching kids whose voices we don't often hear. First off, let me say I'm sorry I was late. We had a admin professional celebration that went long, and I couldn't leave easily without being rude. Do you have ideas of how we can reach some of those kids to get input? And then another comment I'm hoping you can expand on is, I feel like I've seen there be a culture shift in the high school where you and some of your peers are talking a lot about mental health, or normalizing talks about suicidal ideation, and there's not a stigma about going to the counselor. So just curious, like how do you think that culture shift has happened, and how is that something we could continue to normalize So I'm not sure if it's particular to your class and your peers, or yeah, any feedback on either of those topics?
Sure. So I think I just worked with the Benji Project on a short film about teenage mental health during the pandemic. And one of the tools that we used to get a more diverse range of students to be interviewed for this project was by contacting teachers and having teachers offer extra credit for being interviewed over spring break. So I'm of the belief that incentivizing participation usually works. You know, when you have, like Jenny mentioned, when you're just drawing from people in ASB, from leadership, you get a very specific subset of people. And when you incentivize something, you create a more level playing field for people to speak up. And then to your second question, I think that normalizing conversations about mental health, I know that it's not particular to my class. I know that it's not just particular to my peers, but I do know that it falls along, I think, a lot of lines of privilege. You know, looking at how open a lot of my friends are to talking about mental health, I also recognize that pretty much every friend that I'm having those conversations with has a lot of privilege, has often a lot of money. Their family owns property. They don't have a lot of adverse childhood experiences. They're doing pretty well for a 17-year-old. And when I
had access to mental health services throughout their life, like that was normalized in their family.
Exactly, yeah. Well, what they've needed, they've had access to, and often that means that they've needed less, right? You know, I have friends who have suffered pretty immeasurable loss during the pandemic. I'm not going to go into details for their rights to privacy, but I know that they have not been reaching out in the same ways, and I don't think it's a coincidence that they are less economically and socially well off than a lot of other people who are having these conversations about mental health. And that concerns me. You know, when Port Townsend is by no means a wealthy school district, you know, we're not Mercer Island, but there is more money in the Port Townsend community than there are in other school districts around, and that concerns me. Looking at districts like Chimacum, like Brennan, and like our districts out west, I think there is, how do I put this? If conversations about mental health fall along lines of privilege, I think we run into the issue. I think we start to run into very real issues when we look at underprivileged communities in Jefferson County, if that makes sense. So.
Thank you.
Finn, I think we're kind of coming to the end of the time that we planned for this conversation. I don't know how the rest of the group feels, but I would love to extend an invitation to you to continue to join this group and participate, because I think you're definitely adding a perspective that this group really needs. And while we will do some further work on adding other teens to our group, if you're willing, we'd love to have you join us, I think.
Thank you, John. I am graduating in just a couple months and headed off to college, I know, before Chip wraps up for this year. So I'm not sure if I'd be the best person to have as a more permanent member. I would love to send someone your way. I'm from Port Townsend High School. Hopefully, we'd love to look at getting somebody not from ASB to participate, perhaps someone more representative of the student body.
Yeah, I think any way you can help us would be greatly appreciated. And we're hoping to have at least a fair amount of this work wrapped up by August, which I'm not sure what your timeline for leaving the community is. But anyway, just keep that in mind. Thank you so much for your perspective. We'd love to have you stay the rest of the meeting if you're willing to do that and kind of listen in.
Thank you, John. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Finn.
Thank you, Finn.
All right, Lori, can we put the slides back up for a second? So we wanted to go over some updates, and we have a few things that are kind of scripted. So we'll let the folks that have done this work talk through that, and then at the end, kind of anyone else that has additional observations or thoughts since the last meeting. And let's see, who is it?
Lori, do you want me to go?
Is it Denise?
Yes, I'm sorry. Yes, that's
okay.
Denise. Thank you.
Okay. What you're seeing on the screen are the results of what is called the community survey. And the Community Prevention and Wellness Initiative does this survey every single year and has since 2013, I believe. And at first it was only done in Chimacum School District, but now since we have 2 coalitions, it's also done in the Port Townsend School District. And just FYI, we're looking at starting a coalition in Quilcene. So that's more to come on that later. There's been an RFA put out by the state, and we're in the works of arranging that with the Quilcene School District. So at any rate, then that will add another set of community survey results to our data. But the CHIP survey from last year or 2 years ago, I guess maybe it was now, really kind of highlighted that one of the serious problems based on the Healthy Youth Survey was depression and bullying, as well as alcohol and tobacco use. But we wanted to focus on these mental health issues because that's kind of what we've been talking about in this group predominantly. So on your screen, you see that in Port Townsend, 65% of the people believe that depression is a serious problem in our area. And in Chimacum, 54% of the people say that, and at the state level, 66%. So we're pretty right on with the state statistics. And then moderate is, as you can see, 19, 27, and 29. Which is pretty consistent. Suicide, serious, 47, 39, 37, et cetera. You can see those. So those are pretty high numbers. 42% serious bullying in Port Townsend. That goes up a little bit in Chimacum. Across the state's a little bit lower. And then the social media bullying, it's a little bit higher across the state than it is in our 2 communities. And so I'm not exactly sure, how we want to use this to clarify these. Yes, to clarify, these are adult perceptions, Molly. And we don't know, this is something Lori and I talked about. We considered asking a qualitative question at the end of our survey that sort of got into the thinking about where your perceptions come from, right? So why do you have this perception as an adult? Kind of questions to get into that a little bit more. Are they getting it through media? Are they getting it through anecdotal evidence from their children or from community, or are they basing this on their experience in high school? The data also shows that access to substances is pretty high in this area. The numbers of people who think alcohol, tobacco, and other drugs are easy to get I'm looking for those numbers right this second. In the Chimacum School District, alcohol, 77.3% of the respondents thought that alcohol was very easy to get. And in middle school, 47.6% of the respondents thought it was very easy for middle schoolers to get alcohol. Sort of hard to hard, 42.2% of the people thought it was sort of hard to hard, and that's a combined measure. And across the state, 40% thought it was kind of hard, and that's for middle school kids. Marijuana across, in Chimacum, 83% of the people said they thought marijuana was easy to get or sort of easy to get. And for middle school kids, 59% of the people who responded thought it was sort of easy or very easy to get. So those numbers are pretty high. And then the numbers also that we noticed have to do with, and I'm sorry I didn't give the Port Townsend numbers there. I didn't write those ones down yet. But I think they're similar in terms of easy to get. And then another thing that we noticed was that, you know, there's quite a number of people who believe that using marijuana once or twice isn't really a big deal. And that causes me to think about our community norms and how adult community norms can influence youth behavior. And so I think that's something that we don't want to leave behind, that adult community norms definitely influence youth behavior. And so, for instance, if I were to use marijuana once or twice, I really liked it, it's likely that I'll use it again as a teenager. You know, if I didn't like it at all when I used it the first time, I might, you know, be reluctant to try it again. But if I liked it, I'd probably use it again. And so I'm thinking that, you know, it's really scientifically, it's really, you know, dangerous to try it even once when you're underage, because you could potentially really like it and then continue to use it.
Denise, can I ask a more global question about the survey? Thank you. And I think to Molly's point, this is a survey that has been responded to by adults.
Yeah.
Is there a movement to find a way so that the same questions can be asked of youth? Because I think taking that deeper dive into a much broader look from both youth and adult perspectives could really be very interesting. My guess is that there is at least some, if not significant, difference between the response from youth and the response from adults on these questions.
So Jenny and Molly, if this is what you were getting at also, with the Healthy Youth Survey data, what we do is we compare the questions that are similar on the Healthy Youth data to the questions that are on the community survey. And then we identify gaps in those answers. So for instance, let's say on the community survey, the parents all said, you know, I believe that, you know, using alcohol is very, very high risk behavior. And let's say the youth say, our parents wouldn't think it was that big of a deal if we used alcohol. Or the parents say, we think that the police enforcement is really great in our area, and the youth say police don't enforce anything on the Healthy Youth Survey. So we look at those big gaps and we try to do media work that brings those gaps, closes those gaps. And then also we look at where parents and youth are saying the same thing. And we look at how we can amplify messaging around use issues that that maybe parents and youth are saying the same thing, that reveal that we have a community norm that is pro-use, right? Which is how it comes out for us on our Healthy Youth Survey and our community surveys every year. And so those are the ways that we sort of address that, Jenny. I mean, all of the questions aren't parallel, but many of the questions overlap in these two surveys. healthy youth and community.
Thank you, Denise. I think reporting all that out is really would be an interesting report, how they compare or don't.
Yeah, I totally agree with that.
Thank you.
And usually on the healthy youth survey and on the community survey, those depression, mental health questions, those are pretty even. The youth think that we have mental health issues and the adults think we have mental health issues. That one is pretty even across the board.
Thanks, Denise. That was great. Good information. I think next Cynthia is going to talk about kind of the interim survey that asks some of the same questions as the Healthy Youth Survey, which is a good kind of segue from what we were just talking about.
Sorry, I was muted. I know we're tight on time, so feel free to cut me off at any point. As you'll see on the slide, this is sort of a summary of the outcome of our survey. Our attempt was in the vacuum between the last Healthy Youth Survey and COVID to try to get some data that helped us see actually what has been going on, and to increase kind of the reliability and the representativeness of the responses we got. We decided to focus in just on 10th graders, kind of using that age group as sort of a benchmark for the older adolescent group. So we did this by online survey, and we had teachers in both Port Townsend and Chimacum high schools who have all students in the grade in their class add the survey link to their Google playlists as an assignment, and just to make sure it conformed to all best practices. It was of course optional and totally confidential. As Finn mentioned, we did offer the incentive of being eligible for an Amazon gift card, but Lexa Murphy did all the wizardry with the survey tool and totally divorced the actual survey from the entering of an email for the drawing. So we don't even know, which responses connect to which email addresses. And only, I think, a very small number of people actually entered the drawing. You had to click on another link, so we're not sure why that turnout was low. Maybe they didn't believe us about confidentiality. But anyways, we kept it open for 3 weeks. One of the weeks spanned spring break. We, in the final 2 weeks of school before spring break, we had a pretty good response, but we really wanted to improve it. And so we decided to extend it another week, the week back from spring break. And we did see a significant jump in the number of responses we got. So between Port Townsend and Chimacum, we had 53 kids participate, and the total potential sample size was 175. And we had a few more girls than boys participating. And as John mentioned, we intentionally chose some questions that specifically paralleled areas of interest for us from the Healthy Youth Survey, especially the questions around suicidal ideation and depression, anxiety, etc. But we also tried to illuminate more about what kids had been experiencing during the pandemic. So there were some scale questions about the pandemic, and then some free text responses where kids could just write whatever they wanted about, how things had gone for them and their families. And we got some very interesting responses. We also, we had a fair number of kids who skipped that question, but there were still some really good responses. And right now we are working on kind of analyzing that and getting a handle on you know, the reliability of this data and how far we can extend it, you know, make conclusions that extend to the entire Jefferson County age group. We're also working on a strategy to release the data. And as Finn mentioned, we're working on a short video. And if we had time, I would ask for suggestions from people on how we can draw more attention to our launch of that information. We have been talking about potentially doing like a live Zoom event, but if anyone has suggestions, feel free to email me afterwards.
Thanks very much. Will you be sharing the results of the survey with this group at some point?
For sure, yeah.
Okay, all right, that'd be great. And then Lori, I think next you were going to talk a little bit about Stigma, the work that's been going on with OCH.
That unmute is contagious. I just wanted to highlight to this group, because I think this is an important group who has a lot of network in a lot of different parts of the community, that OCH, the Olympic Communities of Health, had gotten a $245,000 grant from, it was, I think it was a payer, Canberra. Anyways, this funding they are using to design and implement some interventions and strategies to reduce stigma in our region. And as we all know, there are all manner of stigmas to be thought about around mental health and addiction from different quarters in our community. So one of the first things that they're doing is opening up focus groups. And I wanted you folks to know when they are and to have a link to register that perhaps you can get out to your networks as well, so that we can get input. And we want as wide a range of people as we can get, so that we get as much input from Jefferson County, and I mean from Brennan all the way, you know, into Port Townsend, so that they really have no reason not to include something specific in their preventative measures that would help this county. I know it's a regional effort, but we want to make sure Jefferson County is well represented. So once they have done those focus groups, that happens between April and June. Then they're going to research what models are out there to address stigma. And when I say they, OCH has hired a group called Collaborative Consulting, who's going to be doing this work for them. So they'll research the various models of what they could do based on the information that they've gotten. They'll share those findings and plan the next steps in August and September. So they'll be sharing them with their board of directors in August. And then starting next fall, they'll be actually implementing whatever it is they come up with that will help us address stigma in our community. So I invite your participation, and I'm really excited to learn what we can about Jefferson County, particularly since it's being funded by somebody other than Jefferson County.
Given our kind of time crunch, Lori, I'm kind of thinking we could skip over that slide. I want to make sure we have some time for Emma to talk to the group and for us to give her some feedback about what we might want her to do with her project, since she's on a bit of a time crunch in terms of completing her project. Okay, if we skip to that and spend some time talking with Emma about what we think might be useful for her to do for this group. And I think at a high level, Emma, we're still thinking about some kind of a plan that helps us to engage youth in our community, whether that's focus groups or what Finn was talking about in terms of involving, you know, kids from the schools. And I do also want to be sensitive to the comment that, you know, we want to make sure we get representation from kids that are from situations where they don't have some of the resources that some of the kids we might have participate. So with that, Emma, I think I'll start by letting you kind of comment a little bit more about what you need from us, and then let's do some conversation about what that might look like.
Yeah, so I have to create a proposal, and we've been talking about mental health. And so I do have to submit my proposal to my school at the first week of May, but I mean, like I said, I'm more than happy to to see this through to completion, and help you out any way I can, because I think that mental health is a really important and especially so I live in Pocatello, Idaho, and I went through like first grade through 12th here, and it's a very, very low income town. And drug abuse is really high here. Substance abuse is really high here. Suicide rate in high school age kids is also higher than it should be here. And so just seeing that when I was 5 years ago, when I was in high school, until to now being almost graduating from college, I think that it's definitely something that needs to be addressed. And the point where the student government, they're kind of self-appointing. So to reach all, to be able to get a clearer picture of the population of high school students or middle school students, that's going to be the challenge, because from someone who was in student government and who did all of that, my perspectives versus someone who didn't participate in sports or participate in any of that is going to be pretty different. So I think figuring out how to reach those lesser spoken out populations, I guess, of adolescents is would be the goal or the challenge, at least.
To your point, Emma, one of the things that we did at the Chimacum School District when we did focus groups a couple of years ago is we had the principal of the high school pick from a cross section of students. And so we got students from all different demographics in terms of socioeconomic and also school participation. So we had some kids who could not wait to get the heck out of this area and that school, and had, really intense attitudes about school and about injustices at school, to the kids who were, the most likely to succeed types, who were in ASB and all the sports, et cetera, and so on. So that was one way we did it, was we had the principal work with the student assistance professional at the school, choose kids from a cross section. And we had we had 4 focus groups. We had them in the Fort Townsend School District and in the Chimacum School District. We had about 17 kids, I think, in each focus group from both those schools. There were 3 focus groups.
And two, so one thing, I think it was my senior year of high school, what they did was, because it was right after they had a student commit suicide my senior year. And so they actually had the teachers, because I mean, from a school perspective, the teachers, they're going to know, they know the groups and they know kind of where, the quieter kids or, so they can kind of identify that. And so they picked, so they had the teachers nominate 2 or 3 students across it was freshmen through seniors. I think there were 25 of us. And it was an all-day workshop where we got pulled out of school and we went to this, and we had the captain of the football team there, we had the cheerleaders there, but then they also had, some of the kids who were known to be quieter or to get bullied. And so it was it was an interesting thing to watch, because these are people who, without this work, would never talk to each other, would never communicate, would never be able to see things from their perspective. And so to have that workshop and to just have kids stand up and say things, and they were just talking, it was a really cool experience to watch. And it was, it did give because the superintendent of the school district was there, as well as like the principal of our school. It kind of gave them a clear perspective of like how kids did view, like how they viewed, different occurrences at the school, and how they viewed, bullying and depression and anxiety and all of those mental health issues. And so that was one way to kind of get a broader range, not just like the people who are willing to volunteer and the students who want resume builders or whatever, anything like that. And so, I mean, that's something, and I don't know, because it was my senior year when they did that. So I don't know if they repeated it after, but that was a really cool experience to kind of see everyone's perspective, because they had just a wide range of kids there.
So a couple questions for the group, just kind of in the sake of time. One is, Finn had some concerns about focus groups, but I also think that's a direction that we've kind of talked about. Is that something we want to proceed with, or do we want to say we're going to look for other methods for doing that? And then I think the second thing that Finn said, and Emma, I'm not sure whether this might be part of your plan or not, but expanding the representation of this group to include, some adolescents and teens, so that we have an opportunity to hear more from that point of view. And I definitely think we should do that second step. I guess I'm looking for some feedback so that we can give Emma direction on the first recommendation. And Susan, I see you have your hand up.
Yeah, I guess I'm thinking about, Finn was talking about, a half of a person for 50 people, but in what Emma was talking about with this group, which I really like the idea of the teachers kind of selecting people out. If there's a group of 25 students throughout our Jefferson County, to spend a day or two in a workshop sort of sorting out some of these things, that seems to me that would be really valuable if there was that large of a group. But anyway, that's my two bits.
Also, beyond teachers, the school counselors and other mental health staff, because they know often more about what's going on with students than teachers do. The teachers often see the more surface, but the mental health professionals in the schools have a much deeper look.
I've been thinking it would be helpful to have, both, because we obviously want folks who have access to the care that is out there, but we also want folks who have not accessed that care, and to figure out why they haven't accessed the resources that are available, and what is that gap. And I guess that leads to my question. I think it's a great idea. I think focus groups are a good way to get some of that detailed information, even if it's not representative of the total population. But my question, I just would want to be sure that this focused on a question, like what question are we trying to answer, or what question is Emma trying to answer with this, so that we're sure to get something out of it. There's so many questions to ask. So.
Yeah.
And how does that relate to the plan that we're working on? Is it that we do the best work we can in this little group, and shape it into a few key questions that still persist, or do we have those groups convene, as early in this process as possible to help shape our thinking moving forward? I guess those are questions that I would have. The timing of that kind of a focus group, because you want to use it well.
For me, it's kind of the second one. I mean, I think it would be good to get some feedback from kids about how we could most effectively, put together a plan that will actually make a difference to adolescents in terms of mental health and substance use disorder in this community. So, and, our focus is on the goal of reducing teen suicide, and how do we do that? So, it's 3 minutes to the end. So, Emma, I guess first a question to you. Do you feel like, it sounds like yes on the focus group, and I think people liked your idea, of, how it was done in your school district, involving teachers, maybe, and counselors in the selection process. And I think Lori and I could meet with you again between now and the next meeting if you have more specific questions about the community. And I think we'd love your feedback on that. I think for this group, let's think about Tanya's question, which is a really good one. You know, and Molly's question, what is it that we want to get out of that focus group? So I think the next time we meet, let's have that be a bit of a focus of what is the question, or what are the questions we want to ask, and what's our hope to get out of that. So, and in the meantime, we can start to put the logistics together for how to do that group. And since it's almost May and school will be done, you know, not long after that, we're going to have to get on our horse and giddy up to try to get that done, I think, before the end of school. So let's kind of pull as many of those pieces together as possible. We didn't talk about, one more thing, Jenny, and then I'll get to you. We didn't talk about the framework today. Lori and I did update that, and this is a chance for me to give you a plug for looking at our website, which has all that information on it. If you could look at the framework between now and the next meeting, so we could potentially put that together. And then Jenny, go.
Just real quick, I think even stepping back, thank you, Tanya, for a reminder about the questions. But I think, I'm not sure, at least in my mind, we've clarified the purpose yet. We can't come up with the questions unless we know what the purpose of it is. And then what the process is can fall from what we believe to be a clear and well-articulated purpose. So I just want to toss that out.
Okay, Jenny, what are your thoughts about what the purpose is?
Well, I'm hearing a couple of different things. We started off talking about suicide prevention. We've gone around concerned about the Healthy Youth Survey with regard to what youth are expressing, or with regard to what adults are expressing about youth. And then Emma's project may be just a bit different. I just want to be sure that we're clear about the direction we're going as in this group. Otherwise, we're going to get pretty spread thin and not have a purpose for these focus groups, which I love focus groups, by the way. So
yeah, I mean, I'll state my point of view, which is just one person, but for me, it's really the focus is on reducing teen suicide. That's the #1 goal of the group, and that's kind of been the focus. You know, there are underlying pieces like understanding better about youth and finding quiet places for youth to, you know, to gather. But to me, the data is pretty compelling that we have higher than state averages of youth considering suicide. And, you know, I think that's only been exacerbated by the pandemic. And for me, that's really, at least that's what I'm thinking our focus is. But I'm one voice in this room. So,
and just as a side note, alongside this work, the school board is now working on their suicide prevention policy and procedures. And it's currently in the process of moving through into their policy format, into the board policies. So I don't know, you know, if they go off one direction, we go a different. I just want to be sure we're working together.
Yeah.
I wonder if we could get someone from the district to come and talk with this group about that. I'd be curious what informed it.
Great idea, Kate. And I think Carrie Earnhardt, who's leading that effort, would be the one to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Lori and I can invite Carrie to the next meeting and see if she can come and talk to us.
That'd be great.
They've done some significant work around it, and it might be useful for this instead of duplicating their work.
Yeah, that's really important. I mean, that's something that Lori and I really value highly, is making sure that we're not duplicating other folks' efforts. Mm-hmm. So we meet again in 3 weeks. In the interim, we'll probably be getting something from Emma. If you could review the framework, that would be awesome. And let's think about Tanya's question. And I'd like to hear from the group more if you think teen suicide is our kind of #1 mission, and that the work we're doing with focus groups should be around how we prevent teen suicide in our community. That's your homework for the next meeting.
And look at that action item slide that are still out there at the end of your slide packet.
All right. As always, thanks all of you for participating, and look forward to meeting with you in a few weeks.